Hey everybody, if you've seen my last couple of videos, you might be thinking, hey, what's up with all the cryptic stuff? And the answer is that I kind of became imprisoned in my own creation, an idea I came up with called the game. And the game was really a consequence of thinking about Steemit and realizing separately that Steemit is both an economic system and a game. It's a social networking game where you win points based on your social interactions, how much engagement you get, how much quality content you contribute. But at the same time, it is also clearly an economic system. You have Steam, which is a digital commodity. You have Steam dollars, which is a digital currency, and you have Steam Power, which is a more long-term investment vehicle. And kind of at the same time, I started thinking about games. Now, I don't think that the concepts were all directly linked in my conscious mind, but it's hard to believe that they weren't somehow connected in my unconscious mind. And so, while thinking about all this stuff, I started to think, well, what if you wanted to create the best game, the greatest game? And I think part of the idea was, well, if we could build the greatest game on Steemit, then that would be a tremendous engine for growth for the social networking platform and for the underlying crypto architecture called Steem. And so I started to think, well, okay, games are rules and prizes and winners. And so how do you build the best game? Well, you build the best rules, you build the best prizes, and you have the fairest way of electing a winner. And so I asked myself, can Steemit be used to deliver on those things? And how can Steemit be leveraged to create those things, especially since I'm not a game developer, I'm not a game designer, I don't really know much about games at all. I barely even played video games as a child, so I don't really know anything about games. And so that kind of forced me to go, okay, well, what's a great mechanism for building awesome stuff? So if you look at Wikipedia, right, that's a crowdsourced encyclopedia. Okay, well, Steemit allows us to not just crowdsource, but it allows us to reward people based on their contributions. So, for example, with Wikipedia, that's run by a core group of passionate individuals who spend tons of time contributing content, specifically a narrow type of content, fact-based, encyclopedic information, and they don't get rewarded for it. They just get rewarded in that good feeling they get, and then the site asks for donations, and I don't know what they do with those donations, but it's a very indirect mechanism, and yet they managed to create a phenomenal resource. I love Wikipedia. That made me think, well, this is an even better mechanism, because not only do we have the power of the crowd, but we have the power of incentives, which is the genius of Steem and Steemit. So, well, why don't we just use the crowd to create the rules? That way I don't have to do it, and that way they won't be bad. And on top of that, well, when people build something themselves, it's called the IKEA effect. When people build something themselves, they like it more. And that was kind of a discovery in behavioral economics. But if you actually think about it, it's a dumb thing to say. It's a stupidly obvious thing to say. Of course we like things when we build it, especially when we design it. With IKEA furniture, sure, you get the satisfaction of assembling it yourself and you feel like you built it. But that's really an illusion, right? What the furniture is tricking you into thinking is that you built it. And of course, that's the best we could do now. That's the best that IKEA could do. It can't enable everybody to design their own furniture, but if they could enable you to design your own furniture, and then they could ship to you the parts at no significant additional cost to themselves. Obviously, I'm not asking them to go bankrupt. But of course, we'd like that even more, because not only did we build the physical thing with our hands, but we built the abstract thing with our minds. And then we got to build it with our hands. And so of course we'd love that even more. And so that's the idea behind the game, is that if you can build the rules, if you can build the prizes together, then you'll all love that stuff much more. And then if you're all picking the winners, just like in Steam It, part of the beauty of the design, part of the resilience of it, is that anybody can complain about the structure, about the power structure, about how much power the whales have, or how little power new members have. But at the end of the day, there's really nobody to point your finger at. If the crowd wants it to change, they can change it. And if not, they can fork the code, because it's open source, and just start their own, which is really just another way of saying the crowd can always change it, because worst case scenario, the crowd can just copy the code, put it up someplace else, and run a competitor site. So the game was really a theoretical exercise. It was just an articulation of a thought experiment that, hey, we could use Steam It to build this game. Here are the core rules. The crowd builds the rules. The crowd builds the prize. The crowd picks the winner. Anything that uses those core principles, those core rules, is part of the game. Now, I put out a couple of posts about this, and just thinking this would be good content. I'm a theorist. I'm an ideas guy, as much as I hate that term. I'm going to throw this out there and see if anybody runs with it. And the feedback was great. A few passionate individuals got back to me, and I've now been assembling people into a channel called The Game. And an unintended consequence was that a lot of people have been looking to me to dictate some rules and some prizes. And, well, so what's the prize? And so, well, what are more of your thoughts? And to be honest, I don't have any more thoughts. My thoughts really ended at these core rules. I have some theories, I have some ideas about where we could go, but I really don't want to even disclose them too much. I'm very wary of disclosing too much, because I don't want to influence you guys and the crowd, and it's a difficult balancing act. I'm gonna try to work on it. I'm gonna try to develop my ideas further and use that method for conveying ideas, and try to be as broad as possible, because really what I want to do is free other people's imaginations to build the game that they want to build, and not to feel like they have to build the game that I want them to build. And really, I have no problem with this game not really taking off. I mean, I think it's already got a life of its own. It's slow, but it's very small right now, but people make content without asking me, and that's what I want. You can play the game now. You can make up your own rules. If you don't like my ideas, you can create your own. You could start your own. If you want more rules, make the rules. That's, I think, the power of it. That's why I think that eventually this game will emerge from Steam It. Somebody will be playing something like this, and I think it will grow, and I think it will be very powerful, whether they attribute it to me or not, because these fundamental concepts underlie Steam It, and they're extremely powerful, and I'm just articulating something that I've noticed. I'm just articulating mechanisms that I see available for use, and I'm sure that at some point people will use them, people will leverage them to build awesome games. And I'm really just trying to nudge that a little bit and accelerate it. And so while all of this was going on, my brother's wife's film, my sister-in-law, aka my sister-in-law, her film got into the Venice Film Festival.
We've got a problem. We have him, but we don't know what gondola to take him on. Do we take the 540 shuttle?
540 shuttle.
Okay, but what if it rains?
We'll be on the shuttle, but if it thunders, what are we going to do?
It was the only American independent film that got in. So my family decided, I mean, they've gotten into festivals before. My brother had a movie play at Sundance. This movie just played at the Tribeca Film Festival. So we've been to these things before, and whenever, you know, it's an important milestone, the Venice Film Festival is the biggest film festival in Italy. It's a very prestigious film festival, and these people, and the people behind the festival just really love the movie. They didn't really have a category for it. They don't do question and answers here. It's really just like a big film festival, by which I mean they generally just screen movies. They don't do Q&As because these are going to be big movies in Italy and I guess Europe. I don't really know. So it's not really like other film festivals where it's about meeting the filmmakers and stuff like that. I mean, Natalie Portman had a movie there. For me, it was really just showing up, giving support, hanging out with my family in Venice, and getting to see Venice. And then after that, my parents decided that they wanted to go to Croatia because it's just over the water. And they asked if I wanted to come join them, and I said sure. I thought it would be fun to kind of work the trip in to the game. And so I came up with this idea of having a version of myself kill myself during one of my videos, and that would create these potential storylines that I could exploit potentially while I was traveling. And so I did that, and people were confused. And then I got to Venice, and my computer isn't working, the Wi-Fi was horrible, and I was really busy hanging out with my family, going around seeing the sights in Venice, and you know, I think this just happens sometimes. You come up with an idea. I never know where my ideas are going to go. Even when I make videos like this, I turn on the camera. I mean, I think about what I'm going to say beforehand, but I don't know for certain where it's going to go. You just kind of come up with what you hope is a good idea, and then hope that the universe kind of makes it a reality and makes it better than just your mind can, because all this stuff takes a huge amount of luck. And so I've just been too busy, and I'm not good enough at that. You know, I think my skills lie in talking about economics, crypto economics, philosophy, writing articles just about law, current events, stuff like that. I think that's where my skill set is, and I'm probably going to be returning to that. But right now, I'm in Dubrovnik, Croatia. So I guess now I'm going to do a little travel vlogging, but again, bear with me, I'm not nearly as good as anyone like Heidi Travels, or Heidi's Travels? Heidi Travels? I don't know. Venice is actually a lot of different islands. I just learned this. Everybody knows that it's man-made for the most part, but what they don't know is that it's actually, I think, hundreds. Somebody told me over 100 islands that aren't connected. They're connected by water, and everybody rides boats in between them. And so we stayed on an island called Lido, which is where the Hotel Excelsior is, which is where we stayed. That's where the film festival was. And it was beautiful, but there's not much on that island. There is a little downtown, which is crazy to think about, that there are restaurants and stores, and it's just it's such a tiny little island. You can walk the whole thing, and in order to get anywhere else, you have to take a boat ride, and the boat rides are never very short because boats don't really move that fast, so it's pretty inconvenient. I mean, I didn't mind. I thought it was great because in New York, you have to take a cab or a subway everywhere, and that's always going to run you about 10 to 20 minutes. So it was kind of the same thing there, except the cab ride, they're literally called taxis, is in a boat. So that's fun, and you get to be outside and you get to be on the water. I mean, who doesn't like boats, right? Beautiful beach. The weather was great. We did go to the mainland. There is one big island, which I think is also called Venice on the map. I've heard it called the City of Venice. And that's the one that everybody sees pictures of. You got that square there. I didn't go to any museums or anything like that. My brother and his fiance did. I didn't because I just didn't really have the time. I only had a couple of days there, and the first day was spent sleeping because it's an 8-hour flight, and I stayed up 24 hours, and I was going strong, and I thought I was going to be able to hang till nighttime, and then it just hit me like a brick wall, and I slept for 4 hours, and then had dinner, and then went back to sleep. And so we walked around the city. The thing about Venice, it's the most beautiful city that is the least enjoyable to visit. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's amazing. It's a wonder of the world. It's amazing. And it's so full and crowded of tourists that it's kind of a nightmare. I don't like crowds. I don't really think anybody likes crowds. It is swamped with people. And oh God, this is going to sound really culturally insensitive, but not only is it swamped with people, but most of the stores and shops and things are things you can get anywhere. They're vendy, I don't know fashion. There's a lot of fashion, there's a lot of clothes, there's a lot of purses. And it's not, and obviously it's not Venetian merchants, it's not Venetian manufacturers. There's nothing there. There's no place to manufacture anything, so everything's imported anyway. It's all probably made in Asia somewhere, and you can get it anywhere. So you're going to shop. So what you wind up doing is just walking around the city, looking at admittedly gorgeous buildings, but just in a swarm of humans. And it's really crap. People are bumping into each other, and I'm sorry, I just hate to say it, I don't really like it. There's gondola rides. Everybody does the gondola rides. I've been twice. I've never done a gondola ride because, frankly, it looked stupid. And so my parents wanted to do a gondola ride because they're parents. And yeah, it was stupid. It's a dumb thing to do. They just take you on a little slow boat through the canals. The guy said a couple of things about that building is that, but we couldn't really understand him. I gotta say, this is horrible, but the culture of customer service in Italy doesn't really seem existent. They also don't speak much English, which is kind of surprising. Now, I'm not saying I expect everybody to speak English, not at all. But if you have a lot of tourists who speak English, in Europe, in my opinion, I've traveled around Europe quite a bit, and I think it's fairly well known that the universal language of Europe is English. So if you want to do commerce and business in Europe, and especially if you want to do commerce and business with people from America, you really have to speak English. And in Italy, look, I mean, I love this about the Italian people, is that they're like, no, we're Italian, we don't care about you, we're great the way we are. And that's great, but it doesn't do much to make you feel welcome and accepted and informed about what you're seeing. And because, especially in the gondolas, and there's really no incentive for them to deliver a really great tour. Because you're never going to see this guy again. You don't pick who you can get. I believe that Italy is heavily unionized. I bet that the gondola licenses are heavily regulated, and it's really hard to get them. And you don't get them based on proving that you're awesome at that. You get it by knowing the right person. And of course, after you go on the gondola ride, there's no way that you can give feedback, even to the driver himself. Like, that's one of the things I feel like people really don't appreciate about things like Yelp, things like Uber. It's not that you get to complain to their boss. Most people don't know that they're doing anything that anybody else doesn't like. And reviews enable people, especially good people, to learn from their mistakes. For example, actually my brother was telling me this story about the choreographer behind the musical, dance musical, I don't know what those things are called, but The Lion King. She's super famous apparently. She's like the most famous choreographer. She did Moving Out, the Billy Joel. based play, I don't know. And what he said was that when they pre-screened, or whatever you call it, that play, the moving out play, based on Billy Joel's songs, the reviews came back and they were scathing. and it was clear that this thing was just gonna bomb. And so she took the reviews and she put them up on the wall and she addressed every single concern, and then the play went on to be a huge success. And when she was asked about it, she said something like, I didn't look at those as criticisms, I looked at those as people telling me everything I needed to fix to make it better. And that's kind of what I'm talking about, you know. It's not about complaining. It's not about bothering people or getting people fired. It's about enabling people to improve themselves and improve the service they're providing so that they can do better in the world, so that they can make more money, so that they can prosper. And there really aren't those mechanisms in Italy, and I think you really see it, because obviously they're all great people. And I'm willing to say, you know, there's a cultural element where maybe, you know, where this idea that customer service should be a certain way is I am tainted by my American perspective. 100% willing to entertain that. Just giving you my perspective here. And yesterday, flew to Croatia. Now I'm in Dubrovnik, way more my speed. Still really touristy, but less crowded, and gorgeous, and just gorgeous. Natural beauty, which Venice doesn't really have, because it's a fake, it's a man-made island. And of course that can't be a knock against, it's nobody's fault, but I'm a lover of natural beauty. And actually there was a great story where we got a driver who's driving us from the airport to Dubrovnik, speaks amazing English, super nice, awesome dude, Niksha. And, oh, just so great. And so far, everybody that I've seen so far speaks practically fluent English, which again, I'm not saying, well, you're shit if you don't, but I'm just telling you about Dubrovnik. The people speak amazing English. Super friendly, super nice. So we're driving, and I see these hills, and they almost look like mountains. They look like mountains, but they're short, so they're hills. Groundbreaking stuff on the Andrarchy block. And when I see hills like that are really steep, I go, I want to hike those. Because they're kind of like hiking a mountain, except you don't have to hike thousands and thousands of feet. It's like a short hike, and I'm lazy, so I really like that. So I go to Niksha and I go, do people hike these hills? And he goes, no, people don't hike those hills because there's snakes in those hills. And I go, oh, wow, glad I asked. I don't want to get bitten by a snake. I guess there's just tons of snakes here. And he goes, yes, it's very dangerous. You have many snakes. And then, like 30 seconds go by, a minute goes by, and he goes, the top of that mountain is the border between Croatia and Bosnia, and if you go over it, it could be very bad for you. And so we tell tourists that there are snakes in the hills, so that they don't hike it. And I was like, well, thanks, either way works for me. We went to this 360 restaurant. That was the first stop we really made. Beautiful restaurant, amazing food, really expensive. Dubrovnik seems kind of expensive. I've heard the nice thing about Croatia is that it's very inexpensive, and we're leaving Dubrovnik shortly, in 3 days I think. And so hopefully the prices will come down. The prices aren't bad, but this restaurant, this was presumably the nicest restaurant in Dubrovnik. You have a view of this bay area with all these ships coming in. You have a view of the hills with all their beautiful houses on them. and it was great. And after that, I went to my place. This is where I'm staying, and then I went out for a little walk around the old town. I'm staying in what's called the old town. It looks very old. I believe it's a fortress. It's the fortress that was created so that they could defend themselves against attacks, I believe, primarily from the Venetians. So, because the Venetians are right across the water, and it's beautiful. I've also heard that it might be a reconstruction, that this was all destroyed in the war. So, I don't know about that. A lot of it looks very old. I've been in recreations in Warsaw. Their old town is a recreation. In Prague, their old town is a recreation, which is kind of a crazy concept if you think about it, especially from an economic standpoint. You've got your entire city demolished. It's incredibly expensive to rebuild it, period, and then to rebuild it exactly like it used to be is especially expensive. But I guess what they understood was that it would have more value than if they just built something new. And at least now this is a tourist attraction, and that actually makes me think of something I've been thinking about a lot, which is this idea of a tourist trap. And because that's really what Venice has become. It's a tourist trap. Their main industry is tourism, and everybody who's there is really a tourist. They have something like 1 million tourists a day, and under 100,000 residents. So everyone's a tourist. I find it interesting to think about the economics of that, and whether it's good or bad, and what I've kind of arrived at. Of course, my thoughts are always evolving on this. I have no firm beliefs on this, but is that it reminds me of a relatively little known concept in economics called the natural resource curse. And the natural resource curse, the most common example is usually oil, and that's when a company finds when a country finds itself on an oil deposit. It can actually be the worst thing to happen to that country. If you look at countries like, well, I guess Saudi Arabia has managed to make it all right, but if you look at Norway being one of the best cases, although Norway's doing well now, before they set up their sovereign wealth fund, and I'm still skeptical that it's really out of the woods, but basically what used to happen was when oil boomed, Norway boomed, and when oil busted, Norway busted. And they literally went bankrupt a couple of times in like a relatively short period because the price of oil is volatile. Venezuela, another great example. This is an economy that became more and more heavily dependent on oil. People can argue about how that happened. Obviously, the large degree of centralization, the large degree of government control, of bureaucratic control over the entire economy, no doubt made it much more appealing to go, well, we're just going to pull this stuff out of the ground and sell it, because building sophisticated technologies, building sophisticated sectors and industries and manufacturing facilities is extremely difficult and requires a large number of disconnected individuals to come together out of self-interest to work together to build things, and if everything has to go through some bureaucratic filter, nothing ever gets done, and pulling oil out of the ground is just significantly easier. It's technologically less sophisticated, and you can always just outsource most of that, which I'm sure they largely do. But then you see what happens, and I feel like tourism is kind of a similar thing. If you have an economy that can't really produce modern products and services, but you have this asset that appeals to people, that people are willing to journey to your country, your area for, so that they can look at the things you have. That's kind of a natural resource in and of itself. For example, nobody alive now, I assume, actually built this town. Nobody alive now built Venice. So in that sense, it's just like a natural resource that the people who are born there find themselves having, and it's very easy to get trapped in that and just dedicate more and more and more resources to maintaining it as a tourism asset, as opposed to trying to develop other difficult industries. Now, the nice thing about Dubrovnik is that, well, apparently the winters are very unpleasant, and so it's really only, and Croatia generally, I assume, so it's really only a summer attraction. And when I heard that, I thought, you know, that's probably good, because they have the rest of the year to work on other things, to develop other industries, and to develop other skills and products and services and stuff like that. And I wonder if in the long run that will benefit these people over other people, because what I see with Venice is that eventually it's just going to die, that it's not going to be a popular tourist destination anymore. But when you look at something like Venice, at the same time you got to think, I don't know, it could go on forever like that. And that made me think of actually kind of the positive side of the tourist trap, which is that as a crowd, we seem to have this impulse to preserve things. You know, when people go to places like Venice, when they go to national parks, when they go to old things that no longer really have practical uses. You know, everybody always says, you know, oh, I hope this never goes away, I really hope we maintain this, and usually what they're saying is that they want the government to, you know, tax people and use that money to fund the maintenance of this thing. But when I look at it, I just go, well, we already do that. That's what a tourist trap is. So we understand the value. We as a crowd understand the value of these places. When you look at Venice, you've got millions of people going every week. You don't have to tell me that we need some huge bureaucracy to maintain beautiful things. We love looking at beautiful things. We maintain it all on our own. And maybe that's what a tourist trap is. Do I think that it's contributing to people on the island living very fulfilled, happy lives? I don't know. It feels like a very stagnant society. But maybe that's my, you know, cultural. Anyway, so rant over. I don't know what I'm going to do today. I haven't eaten yet. It's noon. I'm going to head out. I'm going to explore the city some more on my own. I like just wandering around cities. I don't really like doing tourist stuff. But there is an island nearby that has cool animals on it, somebody said. There are peacocks and stuff like that. And I like animals, if you didn't know that about me. So, probably going to go check that out. Alright, hope everyone out there in Steemit land is doing well. Hope you guys are having fun back in wherever you are. And I hope it wasn't too my last few posts weren't too confusing and cryptic and weird. Obviously, that was all just part of the game. Obviously, a future version of myself did not come back in time and kill the current version of me, and that's who you're looking at right now. Obviously, that's not remotely, possibly true.
It's hazy, so you can't see the walls, but you can see a small cruise ship right in front of the walls of the old town.